there was one of these things standing there. It was at least 7.5 feet tall. It could have even been a little bit taller. It was reddish brown, and its shoulders had to be at least 4 foot wide. It was huge. And the shoulders didn't have like a slope to them. They just went straight across. And the head was just, it wasn't conical, it was rounded. And this thing, it had taken its hair and pulled it over its face. I could not see none of the face. I don't understand that either. They are bigger than what you can even realize, because it's not just the height, it's the mass of these things. They're huge. And seeing one of these creatures, especially in a setting of where you don't know whether you're going to live or die, completely turns your world upside down.
So, we are back for part 2, and we are on PJ's Mountain. No one has camped out here since Carrie Arnold did for 3 days back in the summer of 2022. The plan is really quite simple. I'm going to drive my truck in the woods, set up camp in a vulnerable spot that gives the boogers the advantage to come in close. If you are like me and feel it's a rational assumption that if a human enters into the forest and there's Bigfoot living in there, they're going to know that you're there. So hopefully they are in the area and will come and eyeball this human and see what I'm up to. After talking with Paul and Pam, along with studying the topographical maps, we thought a good place to camp would be at the deer stand where Paul's brother had his encounter. And as an extra bonus, this spot is less than 75 yards from where Pam had her first sighting. To paint a picture of the targeted area, I will be camping at the bottom of a shelf The ridge that will overlook me is about 400 foot in elevation. On the other side of the camp is a creek where the banks are anywhere from 3 to 10 foot high. We will set out audio recorders, plot watchers, and I will be doing night hikes with the thermal. The moon is in the waning crescent phase, so it will be pitch black in the woods. Have I said it's going to be hot? The highs will be in the triple digits with the lows in the 80s. As Paul, Pam, Bradley, and myself search for answers, we welcome you to ride shotgun with us as we will share what we find.
The other day, the trampoline was sitting back over there about one length over, and I was going to mow around here, so I moved the trampoline over to here, and when I walked around this point, I noticed this pile of rocks here, and so I went back up, hollered at Pam. She come down. I asked her if she had put any rocks on the trampoline. She was like, no. So there's 6 rocks sitting here. I don't know how they got there. We haven't had any children out here playing on this or anything. And I've moved this a couple different times, but I've never noticed them. They may have been there, but I haven't noticed them. It's kind of strange how they appeared here on the trampoline. Just a little pile of them here. And they've all got the pink quartz in them.
Well, after we found the rocks on the trampoline, I did pick up, like, I think it was just one, and underneath one rock was a leaf, a little bitty leaf. So I thought, well, it's been put there after the leaves have fallen. But there have been no kids on that trampoline. The last time there was any on there, it was last September. And our granddaughter hasn't been out there on it. And she doesn't go outside by herself. We're all, me or Paul is with her. And so, I did move that one rock and look underneath it. And then after that, I don't know how many days went by, but I went back out there and there was a rock actually standing straight up. And how it got that way, I don't know. And then, I didn't mess with it. Then I went back a couple days later and the rock was laid back down. It's odd. And then there has been little subtle changes in it, I don't know what could be doing it. I know Paul has had to move the trampoline to mow, but, I don't know if that could have kind of jostled things a little bit, but the main thing is how the rocks went from all of them laying flat to then one sticking straight up. And, like I said, I don't try to mess with them. I really don't want to interact with them. Kind of afraid to.
we want to share with you some of the audio that we captured along with the equipment used. My camp recorder is a Zoom H2N that records in the WAV format. I also use several Sony MP3 recorders for drop boxes and to carry on my person. Recorders are inexpensive, but you want to make sure that they will record in the MP3 or WAV format. Plugging in earbuds or using a boombox through the headphone jack will allow you to hear what the naked ear cannot. Pam's attention to details is a valuable resource, whether it's her self-discipline on concentrating on the audio or time-stamping what she hears. Here is an example of just 2 hours of her notes. Reviewing the audio was a nightmare. The cicadas were unrelenting, and trying to filter them out without losing the integrity of the audio was challenging and time-consuming. Just listen to them unfiltered. See what I mean? These audio clips should be listened with earbuds or headphones. But if you have decent hearing, you may not need them. This first vocal, Paul and Pam drove me back to camp, and we were sitting there talking, and the owls started up. And from over the ridge, we heard a howl, and immediately Paul said, "That's no coyote. This is textbook for what we are looking for on the spectrogram." This vocalization sounds remarkably like the vocal we heard while primitive camping at Salt Fork State Park in Ohio. This next clip is just plain creepy. I heard someone or something talking in the woods. Mind you, there was no one else around me, and PJ's house was a quarter of a mile away. At first, I thought I was just hearing things, but the more I listened, I knew there was something in the shadows. It sounded like there was 2 of them, and they were mumbling back and forth. This went on for several minutes, and after it stopped, it started back up again. Let me tell you, this is when you are glad you have a thermal, 'cause all you can do is to keep a check on your perimeter, and whatever you do, do not let your imagination get the best of you. This clip could be a grunt, a frog, or something we hadn't thought of. Pam said this vocal sounded identical to the one she heard right before she had her sighting. It doesn't exactly match the frequency profile of what we believe is a booger, but it certainly got my attention that night. What we do know for sure is it was close to camp. This last clip that we would like to share with you is a wood knock that happened at 4:32 in the morning. One thing you will recognize about this homestead, you're going to hear wood knocks. Pam caught many more wood knocks during her audio review that I heard that night, and this is one of them.
My brother, he's had several sightings of us. He does a lot of hunting, fishing. He stays on the river or in the woods most of his time. But him and this would have been probably in 2019 or 2020, I'm thinking. Somewhere in there. I know it was in June. Him and my nephew, they was night fishing on the river, and they said the moon was real bright that night. So they got next to the high bank, so the moon would that high bank would shade them. They'd be in the dark of the moon there, and they looked across the river, and I think it was my nephew said, "Hey," he said, whispered to him, said, "Look over at that sandbar." He said, "I know." He said, "I've been watching that." He said something walked out of the woods down the sandbar, down to the river, and knelt down. And they said it stayed there for about 30 minutes. And finally it stood up again and walked back up into the woods. But he said, when it was knelt down there at the river, he said it was the size of a cow. He said, and when it stood up, he said this thing was really tall, big. And he's had multiple incidents right there in that area where he hunts or fishes.
So, let's talk about some of the field equipment that we are using. Having the right instrumentation is important, but it doesn't have to be expensive. If there is something that you want to add to your arsenal, I might suggest that you do your homework by watching unboxing and comparison videos. Weigh the pros and cons of each brand. For example, a $50 knockoff action camera might fit your needs just as well as a $400 GoPro. If I could only take one thing in the woods with me, it would be an audio recorder. There's validation in knowing whether the howl you recorded is canine or not by putting it on a spectrogram. Using recorders as drop boxes is a vital tool for leaving in the field for an extended period of time to capture what goes on in the woods after you're gone. If I'm sleeping in my truck camper, I hook up a 50-foot auxiliary cable from the headphone jack to a Bluetooth speaker and bam! I can listen to what goes bump in the night. It's kind of a good thing to know if something is moving around your camp. I tend to shy away from anything that has an IR light. For years, I have been using the Breno plot watchers, and we have 2 of them on the property. With Paul and Pam being hunters, and using IR game cameras, we can play that into our strategy by pointing the plot watchers towards the game cams and see if anything tries to avoid them. Many action cams have a time-lapse mode built in the hardware now, but the Breno is dedicated only to time-lapse videos. With this camera, we are able to adjust the exposure rate from 1 to 20 seconds, which gives us the ability to take pictures using the light of the moon and stars and put it into a video format. The thermal I have is a Pulsar Helion 2 XP50. Being able to see in the dark is huge. As you can see, this thermal takes awesome videos. And when you get a hit, there is no guessing what you just lit up. This little guy wasn't 20 yards from my camp and just sat there on the trail for about 30 minutes. I kept thinking, there are a lot of critters out here that would love to have rabbit for dinner. And sitting in the middle of a trail for that long doesn't seem like a good strategy for a rabbit that wants to grow old. I have several other toys in my war chest that I will feature in future videos. One thing I would like to stress is know your equipment. Don't wait until you're in the field in the middle of the night and see something and you can't find the record button. Practice until it becomes muscle memory. One tip I share with people is putting a felt tip pad that is meant for keeping a chair from scarring up the floor on the record button. Just cut it to fit your button. No matter how dark it is, when your fingertip touches that felt, you will nail that record button every time.
My sighting started on June. It was the week of June 14th through the 17th of 2021. It was on a Monday, and I had went out, and I was going to clean the pool and get in and, kind of relax a little bit. And when I was in the pool, I noticed it sounded like it was just a weird whistle. And it had come from, I guess it would be the east of me in the woods across the power line. And it was just a weird, distinct whistle. It was loud. And so I continued cleaning. And once I got it cleaned, I was floating around in my mat. And then I heard the whistle again. But this time it was closer. And it was in the woods, on our property. And so I was laying there and I was looking down this little lane that kind of opens up into a little field. And I could see something that it was a reddish brown. I knew it wasn't a deer because it was, up in the trees. And it looked kind of like a shoulder and maybe part of a head. And I laid there and I watched it for several minutes, and it didn't move. And what came across my mind was, maybe it was a cedar tree branch that was dead, but I really couldn't tell. So I thought, well, I'm going to float over and get a drink of water, and when I float back, I'll see if it's still there. So that's what I did, and then as I floated over, I was still kind of trying to look in that area, but there was a limb that was sticking out from a different cedar tree that's not there anymore, and it kind of blocked that area. So I took a drink, and when I floated back, it was gone. So I knew then that whatever this was able to move. And then that night, Paul and I We was sitting out front. It was actually late evening. It was still a little daylight, but not much. And then we heard a knock come from that general area. And so, and that was on a Monday night, or Monday and Monday evening. And then Wednesday evening, we sat back out there and we heard another knock and from that same area. And then we heard from the opposite side of the house what sounded like a sneeze. And this was not a deer. This was like a really deep, rough sneeze is what it sounded like. And Paul got up and walked over there. And, he looked around, but it was too dark in the woods to, to see anything. And the next day was a Thursday. And I went out. I was going to clean the pool. It was really dirty. And I walked out, and I have to walk past my car. And when I was passing the car, I heard what sounded like a grunt. It was off in the woods to my left. And, I stopped. I looked around. I didn't see anything. So I turned and I went down the stairs to go down to the pool. And, I put my stuff on I had a little shelf thing Paul had built for me to put my stuff on. I didn't have a deck at the time. And I put all my stuff on there. And when I got in, I heard that grunt again. And, I looked around. I didn't see anything. Anyway, so I started cleaning. And at some point, I heard what sounded like metal hitting metal. And it came from that little field area where I had seen the thing earlier in the week. And then a little bit after that, I heard what sounded like I don't know if it was a limb breaking and falling or a tree break. I don't know. It was just a loud crack. And, by this time I was getting a little uneasy. And I was going to make the last swipe around the pool. And as I was coming around the pool, and one thing I want to say is, I believe 100% in guardian angels. And when I come around the pool, I looked up, and there was one of these things standing there, and it was about 40 yards away, 20 yards being the yard and the driveway, and then probably another 20 up into the woods. And when I looked up, I seen it, I looked at it, I don't know, maybe 4 to 5 seconds, I don't know. And I heard a voice, and when I say a voice, I've heard her speak to me. A few times in my life. And each time it saved my life or my children. And she said, it's a female. And she said, don't look at it. So I just turned back and I looked at the water, trying to act like I didn't even see it. And I knew I had to get out of that pool. And I was about 15 foot away from the ladder. And my pool is right beside the carport where Paul parks his truck. And the top of the carport, it comes down kind of onto the sides. And there in the corner, Paul had the lawnmower parked. And there was some stuff piled on top of the lawnmower. So when I walked forward, I couldn't see up in that direction, and I didn't know if it was walking towards me. And so I kind of stepped back, and I was trying to look because I didn't know where it was at. And then I couldn't see it. I didn't know where it went. And so I remember I turned and I looked at the ladder. And that was the last thing I remember. I don't remember getting out of my pool. I don't remember getting my stuff. The next thing I remember, I was standing on these concrete steps that go up to where my car and the house is. And I remember looking around, and it was like everything was foggy. I don't even really know how to describe it, because it was not foggy outside. But that's what I was seeing, was just like a fog. And I remember looking and scanning, wondering where it was at, and I don't know where it went. I didn't see it, and I just ran on up the steps and into the house. But what I don't understand, I don't know the time loss. I don't know how long. And I have tried to watch, every day, kind of where the sun was at and the time. I've been doing that here lately to try to get a time as to about what time it was I was in the pool. And my best guess is around 2:30 in the afternoon. And I always tried to plan it out to where when I would get in the pool, I could get out, come in, get rinsed off, and get, down here and start cooking dinner. Well, when I come in that day, I went on upstairs and got rinsed off. But when I come downstairs, Paul was walking through the door. And he didn't get home till about 4:20. So from 2:30 to 4:20, that's my best guesstimate, is about the time. I don't know what happened. You can give or take 30 minutes on that, but I don't know what happened. But I will describe this thing. It was at least 7.5 feet tall. It could have even been a little bit taller. It was reddish brown, and its shoulders had to be at least 4 foot wide. It was huge. And the shoulders didn't have like a slope to them. They just went straight across. And the head was it wasn't conical, it was rounded. And this thing, it had taken its hair and pulled it over its face. I could not see none of the face. I don't understand that either. And it was well groomed, very well groomed. There wasn't no like sticks or leaves or matted hair. It looked like it had been brushed. I could see the muscles in the chest. And it was standing there. It had its arms kind of bowed. I could see the hair hanging off the arm. The right side I could see really good because the sun was shining in and hitting from the right side. And I could actually see the wind blowing that hair. And it tapered at the waist. And then the thigh muscles, I seen the right thigh really good. I mean, it was humongous. And then I could see part of the calf muscle on the right leg. I could see the left side of it, but it was more, shaded on that side, so I didn't get a lot of detail like I did on the right. But it was huge. And I just remember thinking, am I going to die today? Is this thing going to come get me? I mean, no, these things have not harmed me. They've had plenty of chances, but that day was different. I've went over it so many times. That day was different. And I think it had bad intentions. And I think the good Lord saved my life that day. And just trying to learn how to get past it. I don't know if I'll ever get past it. But all I can say is that this thing, and I don't know what to call it, they are bigger than what you can even realize, because it's not just the height, it's the mass of these things. They're huge. And and seeing one of these creatures, especially in a setting of where you don't know whether you're going to live or die, completely turns your world upside down.
The purpose of these series of films is not to convince you of the authenticity of what this family is experiencing, but to document, and more importantly, to help someone else that is living the same nightmare. Looking into someone's eyes and watching them relive a traumatic event, witnessing their body language as the perspiration bubbles out of their skin, is more convincing to me than any picture that you could show me. As we move forward investigating, we will do so without interacting with these creatures. Sure, they will see us looking at tree manipulations, and there are many of these. Some are massive, and others are small in stature. We will be traveling the corridors that they are using, but we won't be making calls, tree knocks, rock clacks, or anything else that they would think we were inviting them to communicate with us. It's going to be interesting when I return to camp in the woods far from PJ's house in an area where they have been seen. Hopefully, when I return, the cicadas will be gone and we can really concentrate on the audio. We would be interested in any ideas from you with upcoming experiments we could field test that doesn't involve interacting with them. Just drop your ideas in the comments section. Also, there is a link pinned at the top with PJ's YouTube page that you can subscribe to. Pam does a good job with updating when things happen, and there are some interesting interviews with some of the locals there. Until next time.
This has been a Sawdust production.